Chaos. Woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, chilling with coffee mugs, me and coffee chugs, talking education all across the nation, pushing boundaries, thinking innovation. Chaos.
Hello, everyone. How you doing? Welcome to another episode on Living on the Edge of Chaos. As all of you know, this is a podcast where we are exploring the beautiful messiness of learning and technology, and really what it means to be a human in this rapidly evolving world. And today I am super excited to have one of what I truly believe are two brilliant minds who are the authors of a recent book that I was able to come across and read called Tools, Totems, and Totalities, a modern construction of hegemonic technology. And I'm here today with Dr. Alan Batteau. And so before we get going into those so many questions I have as key takeaways and things that kind of made my head spin in good ways, uh, Dr. Allen, could you introduce yourself with who are you, what do you do, and what in the world do you got going on?
Okay, I am retired. I was a professor of anthropology at Wayne State University, and I have a number of books. The precursor, this book, Technology and the Common Good, which really kind of sets the stage. Uh, the I've worked for many, many years in the tech industry. I worked for a software company before coming to Wayne State. And I've just kind of been immersed in technology for the last 30 years.
I love it. And you have such a fascinating background that I think you really bring, I think, an important critical lens. I mean, as well as design and system thinking and all these other layers that kind of come into this ecosystem as we think about technology. And I know for me right away, one of the things that I was thinking about is, man, I don't know that I'm always thinking deeply enough about technology, even though I think I am. After reading this book, I'm like, I'm not quite so sure that I've really kind of processed technology in the ways that maybe I should be. So maybe to start here, because I'm sure there are listeners who have not read your book yet, and I hope that they will definitely by after listening to this show. The title of the book is Tools, Totems, and Totality. So without going into all the elements, because they can read the book, could you explain briefly these three concepts in terms of how to frame tools, totems, and totalities around technology? Because for me, it was a whole new way of thinking about technology that I have not really processed before. And so I think just to kind of cue this up with one of those things for our listeners, just to kind of be able to wrap their head around the basis for the questions to come.
Okay, uh, technology really kind of defines our world. I mean, the simple understanding of technology is a tool, something that's an extension of human capability. But there's two other aspects of technology that we often overlook. First of all, it's a signifier of identity. Uh, just for an illustration, cars. The kind of car you drive makes a strong statement about who you are. Okay. And if you drive a motorcycle, a Harley, that's a different statement altogether.
Yeah.
So technology is also about our totemic, okay, uh, symbols of identity. But it's they also, excuse me, um, they also define our world, totalities. Okay, that cars are kind of civilization defining things, more so in America than anywhere else. I mean, the Americans have more of a love with affair with the car than any other society. Okay, I've traveled all over the world, and yeah, everybody has cars, but Americans are wedded to our cars. okay, in ways that other societies are not. Uh, I was in France many years ago, and I was fascinated to discover that the French really are not so plugged into cars. The French use they have uh, trains, they have uh, other conveyances, but the car really is kind of a foreign object to them.
Mm.
Whereas in America, the car is a national identity.
Yeah, and so as you're talking through that, I mean, when I was reading about that and kind of looking at it through those three lenses, it really does make a lot of sense to me where I was kind of like, duh, how have I not really kind of thought about this truly in this way? And as I continue to read your book, one of the things that also came to mind was this idea of like the neutral tool assumption, which I think kind of builds off these three ideas that you're talking about. And I'm thinking about like the neutral tool assumption through like a couple layers. One, I'm thinking about, you know, in a classroom, educators, we assume that students are digital natives. I'm also thinking at it through like a parent lens, right? I have three of my own children, and I just assume that they are tech savvy and I know better. Like I live and breathe in this world. I'm fascinated by technology, but yet I still just think, oh, that's just what they do. And I think well, one of the things that I took away in my notes as I was scribbling through this was that I don't know that either I have like a misunderstanding or I have oversimplified the true influence of technology on all people, but I'm also looking at it through like a parent lens or in a classroom lens. How would you challenge that? How would you challenge that for those that think, we have these digital natives that people just pick up on these different types of technologies, whatever they might be? Or what are some ways that we need to like further like push our own thinking in this idea of these kind of like neutral tool assumptions?
Okay, one thing I want to write sometime is a world without technology.
Mm,
Okay, because really, for most of human history, we have not had technology. We've had tools, but technology the word technology was really coined only a couple hundred years ago at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution.
mm,
Okay, technology joins techne practicality with logos, the written authority of the word, the authority of the written word. And we really have built our civilization, excuse me, we've really have built our civilization around technology. Okay? And we need to begin to imagine a world, a civilization without technology.
mm. And why do you say that? Why do you think that would be important to process the world through that lens?
To reclaim our agency as humans, okay, rather than surrendering to technology.
Yeah, so that's fascinating because one of the questions that I wrote down that I wanted to talk to you about, and I think it just naturally fits right into that answer, is this idea of how quickly we resort to tech to fix these deep problems that we have as humans and for society. And so as you're talking about this world without tech and kind of reclaiming our human aspect of ourselves, and I was looking at it through how quickly we just think tech will solve the problem. Let's build something, let's create something versus like maybe getting really at the root cause analysis of why are we having what we having versus this kind of like I always call it like the band-aid approach. Let's just create something and kind of cover it up for the time being. And so as I'm talking about this, what should we keep in mind to kind of build off your answer before thinking about tech for fix to try to quote unquote fix deeper problems, um, and getting back to like this human side, this root cause analysis of the issues that we're currently facing?
Okay, the word I would want to bring in, and I will elaborate, is conviviality.
Mm.
the connection among humans. Okay. That conviviality means sharing, it means making connections, it means getting inside each other's heads and understanding each other. Okay. Conviviality means conversations. Okay. You may have sometimes thought you were having a conversation with a chat bot, but really the chat bot is just a tool. Okay. And a living, breathing human being is something that we really kind of are losing sight of. That
Mm.
uh, the more we kind of invest our time and effort in other human beings, the more we build a society, a resilient society, rather than just a collection of machines.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. It was definitely something that I know one of my big takeaways from the book was I did have to look up a lot of words that I don't think I use in my natural conversations. And convivial design was definitely one of them, as you're kind of talking about there. And so are there tools or examples out there of this kind of design that are positive, that are helpful for us? That we, I mean, you talked about chatbots, which I don't think necessarily is the answer in this case, but have you
No.
seen in your work um, good quality examples, and or however you want to take this? What are some things that we think are good that we should be more cautious of? I mean, obviously we're in this world of AI now, where every day there's a new update, a new tool. So there's probably plenty to unwrap there that we kind of get convoluted in what we think is really positive and good.
Okay, let me throw in two things. A tool for conviviality is the family dinner table, sitting around a
Mm,
table, talking face to face, not over the internet. Because see, physical presence, body language is just as important to a relationship as is the extension of words. Okay, so sitting around a dinner table, sharing food, drinks, is just as important as building a community. Now, the other thing I want to throw in, this is kind of may seem like changing the subject, but it's really not. AI. I say I'm working on an article on AI as artificial ignorance. Okay.
mm,
Because nothing is freer than the human imagination. Okay. But once we put the human imagination into a box, okay, a computer, then we limit it. Okay. And really kind of using AI as an alternative to solving problems limits our imagination.
yeah, I really like that. I like that wordplay of artificial ignorance. It's funny because I get asked to do a lot of AI trainings in the work that I do for schools. And so it's always a fine line balance of helping people realize the things that they need to know that maybe they haven't thought about, that they even should be thinking about and asking questions about, and also not like trying to promote it like it's the greatest thing ever, but then also trying to balance it with it is everywhere. So we also can't be ignorant to the tools, or in this case AI, that's out there either. Like, we have to be able to educate ourselves to make these good decisions. So I always find myself in this kind of like constant catch 22 of like, here are some
Yeah,
things, but let's also be cautious about the things
right.
as well. And that it's a really hard chord to strike, I think, with people.
Yeah. I mean, I think kind of the key is to recognize the limitations, that to recognize that when you're using AI, you're focusing on certain things, but you lose a lot of your peripheral vision. Okay. And it's the same way with practically any information technology, that we process information, but we uh, do not process imagination.
Ooh, I like that. So how do we get started in this? As you're talking here, I mean, I read the book and it really scratched my brain in a good way. You're saying stuff now, and now I'm like, ooh, man, my brain now is spinning even more in a really positive way. You know, you're talking about one of the best tools is the family dinner table, and I can't agree with you more. I was just up in Canada on a week-long fishing trip, and we were off grid, and one of my biggest takeaways was in the evenings or around mealtime as we were making meals, like everybody was connected. Nobody was on their phones checking whatever the notification or text message was. Like everybody was present and just being in nature and being around people who were like all kind of centered in on whatever the task was. Man, you felt different. And as soon as I got in the car to drive home, like after a week of not having any of it, which kind of almost took a day or two of my body kind of like, holy cow, what's going on? Where's my phone? Why is it binging? I come back to the real world and I almost kind of feel dysregulated a little bit because I've been away from it, and I can
Uh-huh.
feel my brain and body like that addiction just almost coming back. So completely agree with you on that lens. And then I'm thinking about the practicality of these things. Like I'm like, how do we move into these things to have more time for family dinners when society feels like it's not created that way anymore? How do we process life when we're not worried about if someone's sending us a notification or if we're being noticed? How are you processing that, or what are some suggestions? Because I think a lot of people know, but yet we still are glued to the algorithms that know how to, get the dopamine hits going in our brains.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of, on the one hand, it's a wonderful invention. We we can connect literally around the world. I dial up somebody in Asia or Europe. But on the other hand, it disconnects. That I mean, I'm sure you have kids, right?
Yep.
I'm sure you've had the experience of everybody sitting around with their phone disconnected with each other.
Yes.
And so really the question is, how do we configure our society? What kind of society do we want? Do we want a society of face-to-face interaction, or do we want a society of cell phones? Okay.
Mm.
Because face-to-face interaction is richer, more meaningful, more emotional than texting on a cell phone.
Yes.
Okay. And I think we have to remind ourselves daily, perhaps, that really face-to-face interaction with the ones we love, I'm choosing my words carefully here, face-to-face interaction with the ones we love is really what life, conviviality is all about.
Yeah, I love that. And as you have done tons of research, not just for this book, but in all the other work that you've done in your career and life. One of the cool things that I really liked about the approach to this book and the work was like lessons from history and lessons from culture and, not just Western perspectives on technology, but non-Western perspectives on
Mhm.
technology. And I am going to generalize big time here, but I don't think I'm alone. For me, I haven't really taken enough time to kind of dive into all of that. Even I'm a former social studies teacher, and I used to for a while, but now that I've gotten out of that, I haven't. What are some things from history and from culture and non-Western perspectives that, as we're kind of talking about all these things, that I don't want to say surprise us, but maybe are some key things that kind of prove these points, that kind of emphasize some of the key ideas from your book. And I'm asking this in the hopes that it triggers further curiosity for people to go in and maybe explore more and be able to adapt that to themselves, whether that's their personal lives or their professional lives.
I would say short answer is building community. Building community. Okay. That this is not a community.
Mhm.
Okay? And when we all are glued to our cell phones, we are disconnected from the people around us. Okay. And face-to-face interaction, sitting around the dinner table, is far richer than chatting or texting on a cell phone. Okay. And so my point would be is that we need to pay more attention. Let me talk metaphorically a second. We need to pay more attention to the dinner table. Okay. Uh, and kind of backing up a little bit, uh, I remember in college, I was a freshman at Case Institute of Technology, and one of my professors there was Oriel Pisunier, who was an anthropologist. And hell, I'd never even heard of anthropology.
Yeah.
I was totally fascinated by it. And so when I transferred after Case Tech, I went on to Bard College, and I decided I wanted to major in anthropology. Anthropology is the science of humanity. And anthropology looks at both Western and non-Western and contemporary and historic society. Okay, so it's all encompassing far more so than any other discipline that I can imagine. Okay, and I think this is what we have to do as anthropology is kind of embrace the total variety of humanity. Okay, and hopefully I'm okay. I with my book, I kind of take one aspect of this, but I'm hopefully paying attention to non-Western, non-contemporary societies to really understand what is the total variety of humanity.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, so much of this, I continue to think about, this enchantment of technology, whether that's the algorithm magically feeding us what we think it is that we need and want. Whether that's, as you talked about with cars, I think about, having the latest phone as part of a trend or a fashion statement, or, what brand. I'm thinking about all these things. My children and myself too. I mean, I can't act like I'm not guilty of these same things. The idea of I think a lot about myself and stuff that I've written about and processed both on my website and even in my own kind of private journals is this idea of boredom. And we've lost
Uh-huh.
the art of being bored, where if we have 1 second of downtime, people just naturally start scrolling on their phones, right? And some of the best ideas come sitting in that stillness, kind of sitting
Right.
maybe sometimes it's an agitation. And we've lost the art of being bored. And I'm just, as you're talking about your ideas, it's just bringing back to mind of, whether we're in schools or our own just lifelong learners, giving ourselves time away, like you said, this human element, just to be bored and let the ideas like kind of shift to the top, rise to the top, and see what comes because we don't give ourselves enough time to do that.
You're giving me a wonderful idea of it for an article. The art of boredom.
Yes.
The art of boredom. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Because
yeah, go ahead.
as I think, I mean, obviously nobody wants to be bored,
Right.
but but having time to really enlarge our perspective, kind of getting out of our narrow rut, okay, uh, is a very important part of growing. Okay, okay, and I'm up in my late 70s, but you're challenging me. I still can grow, and hopefully I will grow with these ideas of being bored.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that keeps coming in this conversation, is I alluded to this idea of like this enchantment of technology, but like the how do we balance that or rise up like the enchantment of just being human? I'm thinking of my kids. I'm thinking of my youngest daughter. We were just in a basketball tournament and we were in our car for way too many hours. And, you know, it's a critique and it doesn't need to be in a bad way, but like she was so glued to one of the apps on her phone, just constantly messaging, right? And what she's after is connection. What she's
Right.
after is belonging. What she's after is to like be part of whatever it is that she thinks she's going to be part of. And the flip side is there isn't anything to be part of, right? It's just it's an idle passing of time that they're all guilty of. And
Mhm.
I'm thinking of that dinner table. I'm thinking about how I've been pulling out old like some old books on like how do I start to figure out how to bring back like outdoor ed and nature into curriculums versus like having kids tethered to devices all day in schools. And I'm just like, how do we get that enchantment piece to feel just as enchanting as, ooh, I got a notification. And that's really where I keep thinking through this stuff is like, how do we get that bar up, while this one keeps, it doesn't have to necessarily be a phone, but it's just an easy example that we can all relate to, just continues to soak up more and more of our brains, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah. I think the concept of enchantment is very important here.
Mm,
Okay. Because bots do not get enchanted. Enchantment is a uniquely human capability. Okay. Enchantment, we get we get enchanted with our technology, we get enchanted with our lovers, we get enchanted with our family, but uh, really having these kinds of relationships is a uniquely human capability.
yeah. And so, as we're thinking about this, and I'm just trying to think through these elements, if someone is a parent, if someone is a classroom teacher, and they're trying to figure out, here are all these expectations of society. Here are all these expectations from either, the family friends groups or the sports teams groups or the classroom or the district expectations. You know, what are there suggestions? Are there ideas? Are there things that we can pull from the past for us in general to kind of think about, how do we be more intentional in our actions and behaviors? Because I will tell you, I don't wake up in the morning and go, you know what, I can't wait to be on this all day. Like my brain's not, that's not what I'm after. But the byproduct is my behaviors would tell you much differently, like, so I also know that I'm guilty of these very things that I'm seeking, and I go into schools and I talk about how can we work without being glued to the internet all the time? How can we close the screens? And I also know that as soon as I get to my car, if I'm at a red light, there's times where I do check versus like being bored. As you were doing research, and necessarily the book isn't necessarily about strategies and techniques for these types of things, but you know, what are things for people to maybe think about or kind of calibrate themselves so we can be, enchanted with the more important things versus apps and technology and chatbots or whatever it is that might be coming our way.
Well, my short answer is how do we socialize this? How do we make social connections with friends, kin, lovers, spouses, children, family? Okay. How do we connect? Okay. Uh, Only connect. Okay. That's the key thing. That's what a social life is all about, connection. And really, this is not a connection, it's a distraction. Okay.
Mhm.
And to really enchant ourselves, we have to connect. Okay. And part of connecting is listening. Okay. Okay. And I would say listening is sometimes a lost art. I know I'm guilty of this sometimes that I don't listen as well as I should. Uh, but learning to listen. Actually, I wrote an article on learning to listen because really listening is an important part of conviviality.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know if I actually published it or not, but a long time ago I wrote something around the idea of the difference between listening and hearing,
Ah,
and I just find as you're
I
talking
hear
about
you.
listening, yeah, it is fascinating, right? And we're talking about connection, and we are talking about building these things that, you know, kind of light us up and remind us of why and how we are human. And it is that idea of being able to listen, to be able to be distract free. And as I'm having a conversation with you or whoever the person might be, to be locked in and to truly listen and hear what it is that you're saying. Not only is it a sign of respect, but it is how we learn. It is how we grow. It is, I mean, there's so much, even like neuroscience to just physical space and proximity and the differences in that. And I just think that it's I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's such a great reminder. If to me, maybe one of the challenges I'll put out to the audience listening is maybe one of your first steps is to go back to learning how to listen, or be listen more intently, because we could probably
Mhm.
find ourselves hearing more, where I can hear you, but am I really in tune and aligned, to the moment?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And pardon me, I hear you.
I love it. I love it. So, as we wrap up here, I want to be respectful of your time. As people hopefully will go check this book out and read. There's such fantastic things in here, and we've talked about several of them, but there's so much more that's in the book, for you. And your other author that was part of this work. Are there key takeaways or are there things that we didn't talk about here so far that you want to make sure that the listeners be able to walk away with, for their next steps?
Uh, I would say, and we did talk about conviviality, and I would say that's the key takeaway here.
Yeah,
That really regaining our sociability, okay, is really something Chris Miller and myself, want to regain.
yeah. And so one of the last questions that I have, and since I know that you had Chris writing the book along with you, I'm curious, how did you practice in this in writing a book together, which I think is a feat in itself, through your convivial living and design? How did you work through that in this age of technology and all that? Did you work in person? Did you share stuff across? Like, how did you keep the human spirit of what you write about together as you try to write a book together? Because that's not an easy feat. Writing a book's not easy, let alone trying to write it with somebody else.
Okay, Chris was a student of mine.
Okay.
I was her dissertation advisor at Wayne State.
Ah,
So we built a relationship together before we worked on the book together. And I think that's the key thing, that building on relationships, okay, is a important part of any conviviality.
that's awesome. I love that. So, Dr. Alan Batteau, I appreciate you taking time to chat with me today. I'll obviously in the show notes have links to the book, but if people want to know more about you and the work you do and things like that, I'll make sure it's linked in. Where are some of the best places if people are like, man, I just want to know more what this guy is thinking about? Because you really brought some really good thought-provoking phrases, one-liners, thought nuggets here to this conversation today. And so I know a lot of the listeners will want to know more about you. So where are some of those best places to find you?
I would say, well, as I told you, I'm retired,
Okay.
but I'm still on the Wayne State website.
Okay.
Okay. And also my email a.batteau at wayne.edu. I try to respond to email, and so if any of your listeners want to get in touch with me, probably email is the best way.
Perfect. Well, I'll definitely make sure I get those linked there in the show notes for people. I'm sure they will, a few of them will have questions and they'll definitely want to chat with you probably some more. So, I can't thank you enough for your time here today. I think for me, this book and your work really has kind of it's come at a perfect time as I was off grid in Canada, and I did remember that importance of the human spirit and being connected. And it wasn't
Yeah,
necessarily a family dinner table, but we were definitely around a fire. We were around collectively together in these spirits. And so as I was reading through the book and some of the stuff, it definitely resonated to just my recent trip. And I'm like, yes, now how do I continue that here when I'm back, in the quote unquote
right.
real world? I mean, Canada is the real world, but like back now where I do have the challenges of the internet and the phone and technology and all that. So I really appreciate how everything kind of magically lined up for this shaping of this human experience and for me to keep moving into these actions of the values and the things that I believe. So I can't thank you enough for your time and for this conversation.
Well, thank you. To
Chaos. Woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, chilling with coffee mugs, me and coffee chugs, talking education all across the nation, pushing boundaries, thinking innovation. Chaos.